It's moderately sized, it's easy to fly, and it's a ton of fun. Greetings, I'm John, this is Two Brothers RC, and this is the Aero's Bigfoot. A Cessna 150 by any other name would sound a lot better. There's very little Bigfootedness to this plane, but it's a very capable bush plane no matter what Aeros calls it. To aid in this, I put it through a new bush plane scoring system for the review section, so we'll go ahead and start with that first. But before we do, let's take a look at the battery placement.
With the SMC 1800 lithium polymer packs currently located inside the plane, as you can see the 1800 in the back of it there, we are balancing exactly in the middle of the wing, right here. Yeah, that's about almost halfway through the plane. Just about.
Introducing our new bush flying scoring system. This is an objective measure that doesn't let me use my gut feeling to make a plane sound better or worse than what it actually is. There's 5 locations that I'll be taking Bigfoot to, starting with the airport Hillside. By far the easiest bush spot to fly from. There's not much of a challenge to flying here, aside from holding the elevator a little to let the plane match the ground as it rises beneath it. Climbing the hill successfully requires a little bit of finesse, but it's pretty easy. Almost anyone could fly here. Bigfoot earns a 1 out of 5 so far. Next up on our bush flying checklist is the entrance to the airport. It's rugged, with only one realistic way in or out, so this ups the challenge just a little bit. Since it's not too difficult, kinda like the Hillside, I went ahead and introduced some extra work for myself, like flying underneath the pine branch but above the chain, then swinging around to come back the same exact way that I departed from. Wanting even more of a challenge for myself, I decided to fly over a chain and then come back underneath it to see if I could get Bigfoot to come in without ripping off the tail. So far, she's earned a 2 out of 5 by mastering the airport entrance.
I think we got that pretty good.
Moving on to our new location, Jack Smith Park. This is another one-way. You could turn around over the playground behind us if you overshoot, but you could also put little kids at risk and probably get punched in the face by someone's dad. So this is going to be a one-way landing, and Bigfoot excels in this spot, even if it bounces a little because of the stiff suspension.
It worked.
There you go.
I did set up Bigfoot with Crow, but it doesn't really do much. What does help is just knowing how the plane will stall, and while it does stall, the 1G stall speed is not very high, and it's easy to maneuver in tighter spaces. Speaking of tight spaces, let's see how it handles my first attempt at this very tight one-way landing in Jack Smith Park.
Made it in.
You say so.
It's only slightly dented too. Like it just dented very slightly right there.
It's still alive.
So that last landing must have screwed up the rudder servo.
When you do stupid stuff, sometimes you gotta replace servos. So I ended up replacing the rudder and elevator with leftover Spectrum metal servos from my Viper 90mm, which was a good idea because our next bush flying location was a little rougher. Conquering Jack Smith Park earns Bigfoot a solid 3 out of 5. Our next location is a very popular mountain biking spot in the town of Cary, which was a fun challenge, especially with the recent rains that we had. Bigfoot handled this spot with no problems at all. I decided to up the ante and move further into the woods, bringing us to the area under the power transmission lines. There's limited vertical space and limited width, but a decent amount of length to fly in, so let's see how Bigfoot handles that.
Very easy.
The gears sound awful on these rocks.
It does.
The huge changes in elevation and the strong hills make for a really fun challenge. You need a plane that has a low 1G stall speed to fly successfully here too. The sharp turns required to avoid trees and terrain will be an issue with heavier airframes, and the rough terrain is not nice to landing gear. Only the higher tier bush planes can fly in places like this, and Bigfoot handles it really well. Even if the gears sound like a dumpster rolling down 5 flights of stairs. Conquering the transmission lines earns Bigfoot a 4 out of 5. Let's move on to the final challenge, the Lakeside Forest, and see how well it fares flying in the most confined area that we've found so far. Our final bush flying challenge is the Lakeside Forest. If Bigfoot conquers this, it'll earn a 5 out of 5. Note the difficulty in flying out of this area and into it, especially with Bigfoot on a 3-cell setup.
Hit a tree, but it still came in. Surprised it did that.
Since the stock power system is a 3-cell setup and I'm running an SMC battery, which is about as good as it's gonna get, Bigfoot is not scale power, but it's not typical RC bush plane power either. It can barely hover on a fully charged pack, and it absolutely cannot punch out of one. Energy management is critical when you're flying in a confined area like this. You're not gonna be able to power out of a mistake. You gotta fly this plane the entire time and never lose sight of it behind the trees either. It looks simple, but this is some of the most technical flying I've done with a bush plane. All I wish Bigfoot had was some more power. I could throw a 4-cell pack in, but I'm trying to keep the wing load down to get that 1G stall speed as low as it'll go. Aerobatics are fun, but getting this plane into places it shouldn't fly is way more fun. By conquering the Lakeside forest, Bigfoot scores a 5 out of 5 on our bush flying review metrics, making it a top pick from us for this kind of flying.
Insane. Oh, that's so much fun.
Now, just because the plane can fly in these areas that I've shown you, doesn't mean that every pilot can do it. What I'm getting at is that all of these insane things people do with planes are happening because of their skills as a pilot rather than the specific plane that they're flying. I appreciate that some people have made this kind of flying more popular to watch, but I firmly maintain that there's not a whole lot of people out there that have the skills to fly like this. What's getting lost in this discussion about wing loading is skill. You can't replace skill by flying a light wing loading. Now, I'm not saying that anyone has said that you can. What I am saying is that you have to consider all aspects of flight. The right time to bank, the right time to kick the rudder in, the right throttle setting, the right altitude to be at to initiate a turn safely. There's a lot of intuitive skill you gotta possess to fly in a forest, and with that comes a lot of practice. You also have to be willing to beat the crap out of your planes. On the subject of wing loading, people do have personal preferences, and some planes meet those preferences better than others for certain kinds of flying. Just because some people prefer doing a particular type of flying exclusively with one airplane, doesn't mean that all other airplanes aren't capable of that kind of flying. I suspect most RC pilots have better sense than the fly in a forest, but if that's your thing, and it's definitely ours too, know that Bigfoot is more than capable of it if it's a challenge that you're willing to take up.
Don't like the bouncy gear. That's one thing they could change, and I'd be very happy with.
Now let's go ahead and finish the rest of this review by looking at the landing gear first. While Bigfoot has functional wheels, the wheels are hard. They are basically lightweight rocks. There is no suspension to speak of. The gear will cause the plane to bounce constantly. The only solution to bouncing that I could find was landing with full span flaps, because that helped take some of the weight off of the wheels and prevent it from bouncing as easily.
Let's try full span flaps, see if we can not bounce this time. That's a much more scale-like approach in landing. It's a shame I have to drop the ailerons to do it.
The gear are definitely low maintenance. There is not much to them at all. Bigfoot gets a 2 out of 5 here. And don't worry, somehow it landed upside down off camera with no damage whatsoever except for a broken propeller. Flight time on Bigfoot was pretty good. You can get a ton of flight time, even on the SMC 1800 3-cell battery that I was flying on. All of the flying under the transmission lines and at the Lakeside Forest was done on 2 batteries. That was a total of over 7 minutes per pack. You could easily get 10 plus minutes flying on 2200 batteries for a small wing loading penalty. Bigfoot earns a 5 out of 5 in flight time.
It's not the most aerobatic plane in the world, but you can make it do cool stuff besides just bush fly.
In terms of agility, it's not hard to get a neutral center of gravity with it, which is needed for the kind of elevator and rudder authority you saw me getting in confined areas or climbing hills on. It takes off and lands without a fuss, even if the thrust is lower than I would like. It's still more than adequate for the flying that I set out to do. Bigfoot has a pretty low 1G stall speed, and stall recovery is really easy. Bigfoot earns a 5 out of 5 here.
Look how agile that thing is. A little bit of rudder work. You can fly this in almost any space you want. Let's see what it takes to get it to stall. Look at that. Okay, we did drop some altitude there. Yank it around a bit. Man, that rudder is very powerful, even though it's so small. Let's get lower and yank it. Look at that thing go. Look how much we could have gotten even more confined with it if we were a bit more adventurous.
Next time.
Look at that. Look at those like pure hammerheads we're getting off. Got to be careful with it, but you can make it do really confined turns, just like this. A little bit of rudder. Look at that thing go. That is really good.
Bigfoot earns a 17 out of 20 overall. The only weakness to this plane is the gear. You're not going to break the gear, but you will bounce the plane. It is inevitable. Even perfect landing technique risks a bounce, and if you're backwoods flying, you're gonna bounce. Some lightweight inflatable tires probably wouldn't hurt here, and if you wanted some ideas on what to work with, you could try out the FMS 1300 Super Cub wheels. It'd be a little bit of work to fit on there, but you could probably get them on. I loved Bigfoot, and I think it's a worthy addition to your hangar. Even if you're not interested in backwoods flying, regular bush flying should be very easy. You can see how well it handles in tight spaces, so consider how well it'll handle for you in more forgiving places to fly, like the kind of clubs that most people fly at. Let us know what you think in the comments, and consider picking up your own Bigfoot from the link in the description to help support us and what we do here at Two Brothers RC. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.